Hey, it's Crumbs. You're lost? How do you not know where you are? It's Thorin's channel.
Right, this is going to be episode 10 of Elitists United. And if anyone's wondering, how can there be an episode? Because all there is MSI coming. No, you're wrong. Unlike NA, where no one gives a fuck about the academy scene. And I tell you that as someone who I would almost describe myself in history as having almost like a deep-seated love for Kelsey Moser, who was the coach of one of those academy teams. Didn't watch a single fucking academy game, but don't care. Like, at this point, I think my own family would have to play in the academy structure before I would ever watch one of those games. And even then, if they were playing, like, you know, a group stage game, I'd go, maybe catch you in the playoffs. Maybe if you make the semis, I'll tune in. So, unlike that, in Europe, we actually have this real tournament. It's called the EU Masters, and it takes in some of those great National League teams that none of you watch except for people from those countries. And then we have a big tournament with it. And now, I actually care about this tournament because, as anyone who knows about the game knows, you know when all those plebs come on talk shows and they go, oh, Forgiven hasn't even played for 2 years. Froggen, when was he good? In 2017. It's like, no, bitch. Did you ever see the EU Masters? You know all those guys in the LCS now who you're all like, they're really good mid laners. It's like, yeah, he was murking them all. Did you remember that? Remember when he was playing like an Idiot when it wasn't even a meta champion, getting like 14 kills? You don't, do you? You don't remember shit. So listen, fucking memento bloke. I mean that as in the guy from the movie, not the guy who's from the LEC, in case that confused anyone. There is a tournament here. So we're going to talk about the EU Masters. So I'll quickly run around the panel so we can get into the episode. So obviously Veteran, as usual, is here. And in the bottom right-hand corner, we've got Larssen, who is the mid for Rogue. I mean, what is actually the name of the Ultra League team? Is there like a special name to it?
I mean, it's Rogue Esports Club, yeah.
Right, there we go. Rogue Esports Club, because apparently they just need that old term club, as it's like a football team or something, whatever. They've got that. And he is someone where, actually, over the split, as we on Elitists United have covered the LEC, we have discussed Larssen before, because obviously Rogue was a team which had players in their academy team which were promising, and clearly in the LEC was struggling with their main roster, but he actually isn't one of the players who really got to have that proper LEC time, because it was mainly top and support that they swapped out. But obviously, we're looking towards the future, and perhaps he will play in the LEC after all in the summer. And then the other guest is Foxdrop, who I don't think he was on Elitists United, but I know we had him a couple of times on Listen Loco to talk about LEC/European region, and obviously doing LEC broadcast, doing EU Masters now, picking up that side skrill that everyone needs, you know, because listen, everyone needs extra money. So welcome, Foxdrop. Welcome to this show.
Thank you.
The only thing is, though, I actually don't know if you do fit the theme, because it is called Elitists United. And the problem is, I think sometimes you give too much sort of shrift to some of the bad players out there in the scene, you know. You're too forgiving as some of them out there. You purposely turn a blind eye to the fucking abomination that Kasing has become just because he's your countryman, you know. You know, you have your own crimes, is all I'm saying is Foxdrop. So all I'm saying is on this episode, get into the vibe a little bit, you know, become more elitist. Every time you think to yourself, would that be a mean thing to say? We don't even think that. So get that out of your mind. You need to be cold-blooded, an assassin, merciless. That's all I'm asking of you in this episode. Just give me the full experience.
All right, I will purge my conscience. It's gone.
Basically, treat this talk show like I'm almost certain, as a good Brit lad, about 4 years ago, you probably played in solo queue on your Smurf. I want that level of honesty, that level of brutal, holding your fellow men to a certain standard, because we all know that by the way, a quick side point, if you're ever going to get into the business of esports, just delete your league account now, pay for the champions on a new league account. You're going to make the money back, but don't ever run the risk. I've never run this risk, don't you even worry. Don't ever run the risk of someone getting the account name of that old account you had and looking up any of those chat logs. Don't ever run that risk. So anyway, just to look, since it's the EU Masters show, I thought I'll offer that as a piece of advice to all the young men out there in Europe who may indeed be brilliant players, but don't realise they've already written the script of their downfall inside that chat box about 2 years ago. So just wipe it clean, start fresh, make a new account, buy the champion. You don't even need rooms anymore. Just buy the champion. Spend like $300. You don't even need half the old champions anyway. They're never going to be buffed anyway. So just buy the modern shit, buy Zoe or whatever, and let's get down to business. So anyway, let's talk about the EU Masters. So first things first, Veteran. Why should people actually care about the EU Masters?
because the next generation of EU and probably North American talent is playing in it. And there are plenty of players who could already be starting in LEC. There are a lot of teams that have a lot of roster issues in the LEC right now where the solutions to them are actually present in the EU Masters. And there are, obviously, all these teams are looking for those solutions as well. So you could be looking at the next up-and-comers in the LEC. You can get ahead of the game with that.
Okay. Larssen, do players in EU Masters and the National Leagues, do they actually have the sense that if it's sort of like an audition to maybe get into LCS?
I mean, I think so, kind of, yeah. I mean, it's like, it's the tournament where you can prove yourself, right? I mean, people don't really care that much about the regular split in like LVP or whatever. It mostly comes down to EU Masters, I think, usually. I think the important part, yeah.
Yeah.
So Foxdrop, one of the things about this tournament is, as I say, because they draw in all this like diverse talent from all these different leagues, one of the problems the National League project had was, even though in its design it's supposed to be for a region or for a country and you're supposed to watch it if you're from that area or you're interested in those teams, the wider audience obviously had a very difficult time figuring out, like, how do these leagues even match up? Like, is the third best team in this league terrible, or would they beat a team that's the fifth best in another one? So in line with that, if someone didn't watch any of the national leagues, who were the teams coming into the EU Masters who people were like pinpointing, like, these are going to be the big dogs?
I feel like the two best teams coming into EU Masters are out already. You had Rogue.
Yeah.
Sorry, Larssen, mate. They went out in the group stage. They, I mean, there was huge hype on them. You had like Finn in top lane, who'd been to the LEC. Vander, obviously, I mean, everyone knows Vander. Larssen's like massively hyped as well. Woolai is kind of a known quantity, but still he's there. Inspired is your jungler, right?
Yeah, Inspired.
Yeah, Inspired is also a pretty big like upcoming jungler. So really good talent there. And then you had LDLC, who are kind of home, like a bit of a old fart home a little bit. You know, Joko, Steelback was there. Ica is a name you might recognize from like 2015 whenever he was playing in Millennium. He was pretty bad in the EU LCS back then, but he's pretty good now. Like, or at least regionally, he was pretty good. He had a decent showing in EU Masters too. And
Steelback plays support. Everyone needs to remember he's no longer an AD carry.
And he's good at it, by the way.
Yes,
the joke would be some would say he never was an AD carry, but anyway, enough harsh jokes. There's unnecessary. He's actually doing pretty decently, right?
Yeah, he is. He's not too bad. He was pretty good in EMS as well. Yeah, and you know, Yellowstar as their coach. Massive expectations for both those teams, and Rogue didn't get out of groups, and LDRC fell in the quarterfinals to who did they lose? Was it Mad Lion? SK. Yeah, Mad Lion.
Yes, SK Prime.
Someone else. Yeah, SK is another team that's looking really good, by the way. But I hear a lot of, anytime I get hyped about SK, people from the Duck region, probably the only region I think who equals the English scene in like pessimism for your own region. Every other region, Spanish, French, especially the minor regions like the Baltics, the Balkans, don't mix those two up, by the way, you're fucked. And the Portuguese are like so like rabidly passionate, which is refreshing. And you know, sometimes it goes too far, but either way, it is what it is, right? The dark region's just like, I don't know what it is. They're almost English in the sense that they're just like, yeah, well, SK Prime, they look good, but wait till they get offline. It's like, dude, the team looks great. Are you going to hype them up? Just wait, mate. Wait till they go offline and you'll see what they're really like. So I have, we'll see whether the SK that shows up is the one that we've seen previously or the one that, you know, the offline SK Prime.
Okay. Right, come on then, Larssen. Give us some comments. What happened with Rogue? Because as Foxdrop pointed out there, the players that had been like bumped up to the LEC, once it was clear they weren't going to get in the playoffs, came back down, and it was clear that like the organisation obviously wanted to try and do well in the National League, win the CU Masters potentially. So, what do you think went wrong?
I mean, I think we just had some bad games, and we had, I mean, a bit wrong read on the meta. I think. I mean, we did some. Yeah, I mean, I think that's it, and versus some bad games. I think. Yeah.
I mean, the ironic thing is that I actually think solo lane strength is like really necessary for this EU Masters. That seems to be like the defining difference between that and between the playoffs, where most of these regions were when most of these regions were playing their playoffs. You could get away with playing really bot centric there, which is what teams like LDLC really abused with Steelback and comp bot side. They basically only dropped one game in the regular season. So they were uniquely dominant. But then when you get here now, and they brought in Hirit, for example, it didn't work out versus SK Prime, who have Sakura in the top lane, who's one of the best top laners in the entire tournament, and Genax is really showing up as well. Yeah, I would agree. So, like Sakura is uniquely strong, especially now with the remaining teams. He's really well up there. He's just a tier 1 player in general, and he could definitely already be starting in their main roster if he wanted to. And the thing that Rogue had was that Rogue weren't playing or weren't comping with this in mind. Larssen didn't really get any sort of heavy win lane win game matchup, so his leader was getting permanent split pushes, and Finn is a phenomenal player, but there's only so much you can do. Vlad versus on hit Nico, that's not really going to work out well, and that's what ended up losing them in the kind of defining game of the group stage, which was the final Misfits versus Rogue match to see who gets eliminated. And so yeah, I do think you had like the wrong read on the meta in that way, and Misfits kind of had a better read on the meta, but with Misfits kind of incidental, you know, like Dandan's always been a player who's gone for these split push champions that scale really well into 2 items, and Leader has always had this kind of champion pool, so it's the meta kind of benefited them. I also think this was like a huge reason why Mad Lions versus Splice, the rematch, why Mad Lions were now winning versus Splice rather than the other way around, because Splice will basically ignore Aroma entirely, and they always have done so, and you could get away with that the last time that they met up in playoffs, and now you can't get away with that. Now Yoppa can just take over the game, and the game will be over. Like the first game was almost a perfect game.
If I can add something to,
of course,
about Rogue as well, I feel like the format kind of screws Rogue as well. I'm not going to talk about seeding because I don't think seeding screws you guys, but I think the single round robin, you have 3 games. Like, yeah. And I'm not even trying to shit on EU Masters for saying this, because I think unless you want a tournament on the scale of Worlds, you have to, you know, it would just last forever. You know, if like different playing,
especially with this many teams, obviously.
Like exactly right. So it is what it is. But still, like, I think one game you just kind of lost because of draft. The first game, I think it was against Fnatic. That was just like, yeah, that game's just fucked from draft, to be honest. So that's okay. So
it was not fucked in draft, but I mean, it was not optimal. Yeah.
It's greedy. I think Bloomberg said on Twitter was like, yeah, a greedy draft.
I mean, yeah. I know that if it was double round robin, we would be able to adapt, right? But
yeah, exactly, right. Yeah.
I mean, I know how good we are, right? In scrims, I mean, I know like how good we are as a team, you know. But I think we just got the wrong read on meta.
Yep.
If you think in the best of 3, best of 5 scenario, you would look at Rogue as getting out of that group over Misfits every single time. Like, I was only worried because it was a best of 1 scenario that Misfits might be able to pull it out, because Misfits have players that can snowball really, really hard in the mid game with the way that they play. But in a best of 3, best of 5 scenario, there's no doubt in my head that Rogue would come out over Misfits, even if they were coming in initially with a wrong read on the meta. After the first game, I think they would just adapt. Because they are a very, very smart team, and they have really phenomenal players in every position. So.
And like the deciding game against Misfits, I think Misfits won like a 10k goal deficit. Like the whole game was ridiculous. That game doesn't happen twice in a best of 3 or best of 5.
Yeah, but it's like, I mean, they did have the deficit, but that was mostly on their bot lane, and the thing is they could never collapse on the Taliyah Pantheon because the side lanes were able to get so much pressure they could never set up deep vision to get a flank on them. And Taliyah has a really free way of neutralizing the midsection, so they then tried to make a play on the side lane versus the Nico or the Zed, and they couldn't do shit about that, and they ended up not having too much of an option there. So even though they had the deficit,
I mean, for sure, we could have played like way better. I mean, we didn't perform as well as we should. Like, it was not only like draft or anything. Like we just didn't play as well as we should, you know. So.
Sure. Okay. I mean, they even had Baron at one point, and they just kind of like gave that up. And like stopping Baron 2v5 is not like an insane macro play from Misfits. So yeah, obviously you guys can play better.
Right, being as the 2 teams that did make it out of Rogue's group have both gone to the semi-finals, were those teams, so Fnatic Rising and Misfits Premier, were those teams actually considered strong teams themselves? Like, was this like a group of death scenario? Have they just during the tournament emerged to be strong?
Yeah,
it was called the group of death, but I'll be honest with you, like, I had 0 expectations for Fnatic because, you know, UK scene, right? Just because it's the UK scene, you know. Sure. And I know what the UK scene has been like, and it's like, sure, you look good domestically, but like UK scene. So I was like not sure what was going on there. Obviously optimistic, but realistically pessimistic. But Misfits, I don't think anyone really. I wasn't convinced by them in the play-ins. They have very talented solo laners, especially. I mean, Leader is, you know, kind of probably one of the best mids going through.
For context, Veteran has multiple times said like he thinks he should be an LCS player as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. I'm fully aware of Veteran's boner for this player, but I don't know. I honestly, I think as the tournament went on, we saw much more that it did become a very solo lane centric, like, well, playstyle tournament in general. So kind of in hindsight, Misfits are like, yeah, you rolled into that meta perfectly, right? But I don't really think they were looking that strong. I mean, for context, domestically, Misfits weren't great regionally until the playoffs, where they had to go like full gauntlet Cloud9 style, where they had to win, I think, 3 best-of-5s to get to the finals against LDLC, which put them into the 2nd seed. They lost to LDLC, but still, like, you know, they weren't. This was not a dominant team in the spring split by any means.
So the window that I thought Misfits had to get out, if they had a window at all, wasn't actually through Rogue. I actually thought it was through Fnatic. Because I think the way that you generally, in the regular split, the way that you beat Misfits was you actually abused how their top and jungle played out in the early game. And that you actually had a lot of windows to get ahead there, and then it would be that Neon and Hiva were kind of like a rock bot side, and then mid lane was a complete bloodbath. But that didn't actually play out that way in this tournament. Instead, bot lane ended up kind of being the abusable point. And top side had some pretty phenomenal games. Even if the lane, I still don't think Dandan's laning phase is really that strong. But Dandan had a lot more options while people were focusing on bot side to actually get to the point where he is really good, which is when he gets to the split push phase of the game. So I thought that they were going to end up not doing so well versus Fnatic, or that Fnatic was actually the team that they could potentially come out ahead of, because I don't actually think Shikari is one of these like top tier top laners. And as a team, I think they've always played really well around Xmati and Magic Felix, and that this might just naturally make it so that Misfits had more options versus them than they would versus Rogue. That isn't how it turned out. Dan's actually being one of the best junglers in the entire tournament, I think. And even though their solo lanes didn't quite show up for them versus Ventus, for example, they adapted to that pretty fast by the 3rd game. So,
what did you think, Larssen? What did you think of that? Like, had you practiced against any of the teams in your group? Did you have high expectations for them?
I mean, I don't think like any team is like that good. I mean, I think we should be like easily be able to beat every team besides LLC. So I was like confident, right? Because I mean, we scrimmed Fnatic quite a lot, and I mean, they're like a pretty decent team, like macro-wise, but they're like just mediocre team, I think. And Misfits are like clowns to me. A bit like they play very weird, I think.
Yeah, they're not a very smart team.
I mean, I feel like both these teams are like fine teams, right? But yeah, I mean, nothing special.
Okay.
Sure. I mean, Misfits were never like the smartest team in regional leagues, not just because of the early game things, but they're not really that good, smart about how to play out the mid to late game. But they keep getting phenomenal split push champions now in a meta where that seems to work out for them. I think, I mean, even in the games that they win, you can see where their abusable points are right now when it comes to mid to late game. So a team like Rogue or a team like Fnatic, they're both way smarter than them. And they should come out ahead, but that isn't the way it turned out, obviously.
Okay. Right. One name that people will obviously be familiar with is Freeze, who plays for the Splice Vipers team. Now, this team made the top 8 and then went out to the Mad Lions team. Is it any good team? Is Freeze in anywhere comparable form to anything we might have seen in the past? What do you think, Foxdrop?
I don't think Freeze was... Man, how do I describe this? Freeze was like okay, but I'm just going to leave it okay. But I also don't necessarily think that. So we talked a lot about how it's been like a solo lane meta, right? Freeze was kind of put on bitch duty the whole tournament. They didn't play through bot lane much. I think his most played was like Sivir, and I think like he what was the game? Crap, actually, was he playing Ashe in that last game?
Yeah, he was playing Ashe in that last game versus Vayne.
That like. Yeah, it's like, see, that's also another thing where that was a game where your AD carry can shine, and Vayne did shine, right? But he's on Ashe, and it wasn't a great game from him in that specific game. I don't think he stood out personally in EU Masters, but I'd also wouldn't put it on him necessarily, if that makes sense.
That does make sense, because I definitely wouldn't put it on him either, but I kind of disagree with the assertion that they didn't play through bot lane. They did play through bot lane, even if he is playing kind of more utility champions. Ashe does do a phenomenal amount of damage, by the way. I kind of get a bit triggered whenever people refer to Ashe as, like...
But in comparison to Vayne, do you really think that Vayne is going to be like...
Well, this is the thing. I don't actually think that Vayne was like the defining thing that was winning them the game, though, because Vayne was monster behind because of the Ashe pick and because Splice were playing around. And eventually, the only way that they were able to get Vayne on vague parity, and they didn't ever really get Vayne on parity, was by permanently placing her on side lane. And then it just happened to work out that Splice were permanently grouped 5-man mid no matter what. So the XP differential ended up coming in, but the gold never ended up actually coming in for the Vayne. And I don't think the Vayne was a defining factor in that game. And I think Free did a really good job keeping the Vayne behind. And I think Splice refused to ever play around top side and will always play around bot side, even if he's going for these kinds of champs. I do agree that he wasn't as impactful this tournament as he could have been, though. I do think Freeze had a really good tournament. I still wouldn't put him on like a tier list on the pure basis that I think grabbing Freeze in your team is like cheating, if you want me to start rating AD carries at the tournament. He was a huge deal, though, in their LVP series versus Mad and versus Origin in their LVP run, because Splice, so you pointed out that like Misfits kind of had to pull like a full-on gauntlet scenario. Yeah, Splice really barely made it in to
as a tiebreaker. It's literally a tiebreaker.
They were 1-5 at one point in the split, or was it even worse than that? They get to 1-6. Might have gone from to 1-6, and then they clawed their way all the way back. Ended up with the tiebreaker. Ended up starting from right at the bottom, and they ended up winning the whole thing in a 5-game set for the last game. Which they technically lost, and then Origin did a really bad TP when they could have just ended the game. And yes, that game made me depressed to watch. And that's why they actually if they didn't win that game, they wouldn't even be here right now. But Freeze was really phenomenal for them for that entire time. So even though you can say that he wasn't that impactful here, I still think he had a pretty good presence at this tournament. And I still think he's performing really well, but he's performing at the level that you should kind of expect a former EULCS player to perform anyway. So it's not like it's Forgiven Reborn or something like this.
Okay. What about so another team that had some players, before we get to like the big teams that obviously going to contest the rest of the playoffs, another team that had people I recognized was the big team, the Berlin International Gaming, where they had White Knight, who obviously is an infamous solo queue player, Sir Nukes a lot, some players we've heard before. Was this actually a team that was competent?
They were like, I'd say they were kind of like a B to A tier team. Like of the first seeds, they were the weakest. But I also think that they had the group alive, right? They in their group, three other teams, were all teams that you stick them in another group, they arguably wouldn't get out. They're all kind of they're all like just not very good teams. In comparison to the other playoff teams, and so Big didn't struggle in the group stage, but then kind of just got. I don't really know how to best analyze Big. They felt very similar to other teams. It's gonna sound so dumb. This is like the dumbest analytical comment, but they were similar to other teams, but just across the board, just a bit worse, just straight up. I think White Knight is really good as a top laner if you give him the right champions, but I don't think he's not enough.
Nice. Time to farm all the German fans. I actually think Big looked really, really good coming into the tournament. Big versus SK Prime in the German league is the reason why people like accuse SK Prime of being chokers on offline events, because everyone kind of figures.
Wasn't there more than that? Because like I heard like every single time SK got us offline, they just choked. I'm not like really familiar with SK Prime's.
But like I feel like when you're in kind of a development stage of your career, then I'd rather go split for split. So like Magic Felix has also had this kind of similar history, but I wouldn't necessarily put that on him now because I haven't seen any proof of that this split. Like maybe he's gotten over it. Like
did you see the Ventus series though?
Yeah, but that wasn't offline, which is what everyone says he took that. Okay, so the Ventus series, the first game, yes, it was a bit of a BG. The second game, I think he did well, and the third game, I think he did really well. The CS stats kind of lie in the third game for Magic Felix. I'll get back on the big point. But the third game, the stats kind of lie a bit for Magic Felix there, because he only got behind because Corki got one really good TP reset off. That's the only reason why I ended up seeming 2 waves behind. But he actually played that game out really well, I think. But on the topic of big, they actually do have players that have had a bit of a reputation for choking in opportune moments. And especially talking about Zazie here. And despite the fact that Zazie has this kind of reputation, he actually played really well in the first game when they gave leader Yasuo versus Misfits. Leader actually got an advantage not in lane, but by quadra killing at Drake, which is not the kind of thing that you can prepare for casually. And it wasn't until the last game where you really saw the nerves kind of hit. And the last game, yeah, you saw the nerves kind of hit, but he played a really, really good second game as well. And this also looked like a really standard Misfits game, if that makes sense, because like you mentioned, White Knight's a pretty good laner, and they really tried to play through that. Like, they got White Knight on Rise, they really abused the fact that Obsess and Dan aren't really quite on the same page in the early game, and this seemed to be their strategy going through the series, and they could have won by doing this. I think the last game could have gone either way if Leader doesn't start solo killing you on the turret level 3 and stuff. But
yeah, that was
it's a bit. Yeah, like there's like if you remove this kind of like X factor that Leader can just suddenly start popping off like that, then I think actually Big came in with a really solid game plan versus Misfits, and I think that they could have shown a lot more in the tournament. So I don't think that they were like one of the worst teams. I mean, kind of agree with you. Huh?
I think Big were one of the stronger teams. Like behind us and LLC, I would rate Big behind us and LLC. Like I think they're pretty strong, but.
Yeah, I agree. This team doesn't have like a specific like objective weakness that they have on their roster that I can like point out with a lot of other teams in the tournament.
I think they have
teams
one
that have one of the
weakness,
most well-rounded ones.
I mean, they have Don Arts, right? I think he has been performing pretty bad in important games. So.
I agree with you that Donut's like as a jungler might not be the best, but their jungle system is actually really good compared to teams like Misfits, for example. Like I actually think the way that they use their jungler is a lot better.
Can you expand on jungle system? Because I think Obsess has looked like one of the worst junglers.
Yeah, he has.
And I'm curious, like, is that him or is that the system? And
well, this is always a really difficult thing, no, to say. So I know from solo queue. And from watching Donots on other teams, that Donots doesn't necessarily perform super effectively. But on this team, he is kind of where he needs to be in the early game and sticks really close to their specific plan. And I don't know if that comes from Donots or if that comes from the rest of the team. And this is the same kind of similar thing when it comes to Obsess. So when it comes to Obsess, you can say that he is bad if you start looking at like the way that he mechanically played Gragas, for example, in that series. But when it comes to the jungle system, we don't know if that's necessarily coming straight from him or if that's coming straight from the laners, you know? So I kind of try to make this distinction. So like, for example, I think Fnatic adapted their jungle system really well. I still think I wouldn't necessarily go for Broxah as being a top tier jungler because Broxah seems to be led by whoever is loudest on the team. And that's why when they lost Caps, it became like a huge BG for them. And then suddenly Broxah didn't seem to have like the insane pathing that he did last year. So there's some place where you can kind of identify if it's a strong jungler or a strong jungle system, you know? And this is kind of where I see Big. They don't necessarily have the strongest jungler, but because they have a really good jungle system, it doesn't seem to matter so much as it did for example, Ventus versus for Fnatic Rising. You could really see that the way that Fnatic Rising use jungle is just so much superior to the way that Ventus uses their jungler, for example. And that's not necessarily going to be on him. Whereas Splice, they permanently play towards bot side with Tearwolf, but Tearwolf was brought in because he is a vocal person. So there I'm more likely to just say that Tearwolf himself might be bad, but still maybe he is being told that this is the way to play the game by his coaches, for example. So, but I'm more likely to then put it on Tearwolf because they are pretty vocal about the fact that he is an in-game leader, you know?
By the way, as an aside, Veteran, when you do articles for LoL Esports, do they like commission the topic or do you pitch the premise that you wanted the article to them? How does it work?
I pitch the topic.
Because I noticed with the stuff you've done more recently, it's been a little bit more general, like it's like a profile of a team or whatever, or like the trajectory that you think a team's on. But I actually would like to see you do some more stuff like you did back on the score days, because when you say that about Broxah, mate, that's exactly the sort of topic which was a prime article candidate, because I'm not someone. I personally don't like the whole term contrarian because people always apply it as though it just means you just like it's like you hear, what do you think? Right, I think the opposite, which is obviously a ridiculous premise for anyone to have. But if you ever are someone, I always used to tell Kelsey and the others this: if you ever really do have a take that you've really thought about and studied, and it goes really counter to what most people think is the consensus, that is the perfect sort of thing to write about. Now, sometimes you'll get wrecked from it, but sometimes you'll be very prescient if you do it.
That's the kind of thing that I might consider doing for another place that isn't Lol Esports, because Lol Esports kind of want me to have a positive slant on my articles.
Okay.
Which is why you've seen less and less negative articles from me over time on Lol Esports. But they have allowed me to go look for other places. So this is a mini advertisement. If you want good articles, go for me.
Yeah,
there you go.
Because that's exactly the sort of topic where, remember, like the hype for Broxer at Worlds was unreal. Like I thought they were a good team, but even I was like, could you just calm down? Like, when people are calling him like the best jungler in the world, all sorts of mad shit like that. It's like, what are the odds that in 1 year he became the best jungler after what we saw the year before? But the other thing is, now people are there's a bit more wiggle room. People will let you criticise him, but I notice most people still want him to be all pro. Most people still thought he was one of the best players. So if you really feel that strongly, I would like to see that content, mate. I think that would be a good piece to like really, because the good thing about text, to finish up the aside, is you have a lot more space to unpack ideas. And you can do it in a way that like you don't get the same stupid arguments, because when someone mishears something in a video, they're not going to go back and listen to exactly how you phrased it. But if it's written on paper, well, then they're a moron if they keep repeating the wrong thing out. You can literally just show them like the sentence, like, I didn't say that, did I? So for me, that would be in the wheelhouse of the sort of thing I'd like to see unpacked more.
You say this, but most of them don't read past the headline. Thorin,
Probably not, but whatever. Some people do. Some people care. Right, moving on anyway. Let's talk then, what about the Mad Lions team? Because this is a squad where people know, obviously, most of their talent was strip-mined out to the LCS, LEC rather. Now, admittedly, not necessarily that well, like they sort of sold them all off piecemeal in a way that didn't make a lot of sense to me if you look at some of the synergies. What about the newer Mad Lions squad? Like, who is this team?
Someone else.
You know everything about every team.
I'm even most of these wide open, by the way, because I don't know the league myself. Exactly. All right, Larssen,
you cast it. You watch
give me some initial thoughts. One of you two. Come on.
I don't know, really.
You don't know anything about Mad Lions?
Someone else should take it. I haven't played enough.
I've we've been fed this information for fucking ages to draw narratives and storylines for the cast, so I can regurgitate some.
Come on then.
So Mad Lions, did you know they won everything in 2018 summer?
Oofed.
I had a suspicion.
Tell me more.
Yeah, but 4 of the 5 members went to the LEC, which is a nice underlining the significance of EU Masters as a scouting ground for top level competition in Europe. Mad Lions 2019, however, Falco is the only returning member, and he wasn't taken because people thought he was like old and was like the weak link, basically. And going into this EU Masters, they had like a really good. They were first place in the regular season, which is how they qualified, but then they fucking crashed and burned in the playoffs, right? They went 0-3 against Splice, like you mentioned, Veteran. Like the series against them was like the first kind of series that's got Splice rolling in the Super League finals.
Yeah.
But yeah, they sucked in the playoffs, and then the first day of playing, they're 0-3, and Aranea is quite vocal about just everything, I suppose. And we were talking. I was like, I've been talking to him a bit over EU Masters, and like, he just said that they just like he doesn't have like a good explanation. He's just like, yeah, we just forgot how to play League of Legends. Like, just straight up, he just said that after the first day of playing. And it's like, okay, then I guess the team sucks. Like individually, like. You know, like Blue Resort, their jungler has been around for 8 years, and loads of different regional teams always look pretty solid. Yopper was touted as the best non-top non-LEC top laner. Yeah, you know what I mean. I don't think that title. I think that title goes to Sakurai now, but still, either way, that's the reputation that Yopper had. And you know, like this was meant to be a good team. Now they've won 10 games in a row going into like the live finals, which will probably change because Yopper hasn't got his visa, which really sucks for them. But what I don't understand about this lineup is whenever I talk to Aranea and I'm like, yo, you know, that was cool. Like they almost perfect gamed. I can't remember what the team was. It was someone in group stage. It almost perfect gamed them. And I was like, yo, you guys are looking like pretty good compared to how you were first day of playings, right? And Aranea was just mad. because it was like, oh yeah, Blue Azure shouldn't have done this, and then Yoppa entered the advantage we gave him. He was pissed. His team like almost perfect gamed, by the way, and he was just mad because of these like tiny little micro mistakes that his team made. So whether or not Aranea just has like the belt really wound tight, and that's what's motivating this team to like perform at superhuman levels, I'm not sure. But they look like a team that is overperforming for me, but I can't pinpoint like why. If that makes sense, I don't know if that makes any sense. But I just look at them and I think you guys probably shouldn't be as good as you are, but you really are. And I wonder that Pretty, their mid laner, I feel like is probably the weakest mid laner that we've got going into the finals. Compared to you got Genex, Magic Felix, Pretty, and Leader. I think Pretty is worse than those three. Especially if you stick him on Gangplank, don't do that. And yeah, so it's a team that now they've lost Yoppa going into the semi-finals, assuming he doesn't get his Vegas in the next day, is probably just going to crash and burn against Misfits.
Yeah, the visa thing really messes it up. But this was a team outside of the visa thing now that was basically built for a tournament like this. And first day, you saw stuff like Yoppa being on Poppy, and I never want to see that shit on my screen again. Please, for the love of God. And then they ended up with this Zillion Hecarim composition that they were just spamming until someone decided to ban it, which wasn't until after playing, by the way. So that's kind of how they ended up making it out. And the thing is, they have one of the strongest top sections in the entirety of the regional leagues. Yoppa, Blue Azure, Pretty. Those were three of the absolute strongest players in those roles. When they made it. So I'd somewhat agree with you, I guess, that maybe Pretty is the weakest, but it would be close between him and Genex in my eyes, because Pretty has shown some pretty phenomenal performances over the years, and I think he's being a bit underrated. He hasn't had the best split. I think he's more... No, I'd still put him up there, though. So saying that he's the worst isn't tantamount to saying that he's bad. At the very least, I would kind of agree with that. Blue Azure was the guy who basically heralded Gamers Origins' dominance of the French scene that they kept up for over a year. I think they kept that up for like 2 years, winning almost everything in the region.
Well, Tinks was on Gamers Origin in 2018.
Tinks was on Gamers Origin after Blue Azure. He replaced Blue Azure.
Oh, after Blue Azure.
And the first time that Tinks played for them, actually, they ended up losing that LAN. That was the first LAN that they had lost all year. But then they won everything after that. But Blue Azure was like the guy for Gamers Origin in their initial setup, where they basically had no known players whatsoever. These guys were just like 5 complete randoms, and then they just started winning everything. So it was a really nice storyline. He ended up going to Movistar and stuff, but he's always been one of the strongest junglers in the regional leagues ever since he exploded onto the scene, I think. I think Larssen disagrees on that one.
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. And Yoppa, so I don't think anyone ever said that Yoppa was like the best guy coming in, but there was kind of like a big three, and it was like a Romer, Yoppa, and Finn last year, and you had Sakura loaded in with them as well, and you had Ice Beasto loaded in with them as well. Now you don't really have Ice Beasto loaded in with them. You had Shemek. Actually, Shemek was the other one. Okay, so Shemek was the other like kind of big name that you would hear a lot. You're not going to hear so much of Shemek now because Vitality didn't actually make it this far. I still think that Shemek had a pretty good split, but it wasn't like on the outstanding level that he had beforehand. Yoppa was still trying to play his style in a meta where it didn't really kind of suit them. When you could just play really hard through bot lane and have that work out. And he became a little bit of an abusable point sometimes. He could have played better, but I still think overall he was still playing really, really strongly. And now that the meta really suits solo lanes, you're seeing Yoppa play really, really well in the EU Masters now that they have him off all of the fucking tanks. So I actually think this team was kind of built for a meta like this, and the way that it has shifted is like really, really good for them. Because Blue Azure's one of the only junglers that has done things at the level of Dan in the tournament, especially out of all the junglers that are maining. I think it's just him and Dan that are the really good junglers. So I think they have a lot of good options.
Okay. Right. We touched briefly before when I asked about how good like Fnatic and Misfits were on the Fnatic Rising team. Foxdrop, what is your take on Magic Felix? Because this is another person that Veteran has put forwards many times as like should be on the, at least on the radar for LEC teams that need a mid, you know?
Yeah.
Well, it's cheating now.
Yeah. I think I don't understand Magic Felix. It's the best way to describe it. Because I actually think this coming up, the EU Masters, is gonna put like a proper kind of full stop on Magic Felix and where he stands in like the context of professional league. Because loads of rosters, from what I've heard, loads of rosters in LEC are gonna get blown up, or are looking potentially. There's lots of looking eyes. I'll put it that way. And you're gonna look at Magic Felix like straight up. I mean, Larssen's probably like the pick of the bunch because he's so handsome. Apart from that, you've got Magic Felix, like this huge name. And actually, you said this when we were talking in the end direction, that branding is like paramount, right?
Yeah,
I think Magic Felix has a ridiculously strong brand of, you know, this is the guy who has 5 accounts in the top 3 challenger, right? And yeah, right, whatever. It's like
now leader's number 1.
Okay, now leader's number 1. Sure. Now the blue juice guy is number 1. But so I think to more directly answer your question, Thorin, it's like he's been good in the UK scene, and he was very good in the playoffs, in the UK playoffs. And he was very, very, very good in group stage in EU Masters. I think he had like the highest damage per minute, one of the highest damage shares. I don't think he died in the group stage once or something ridiculous like that. He was like phenomenal, right? And this is in the group of death, right? This is with Misfits, this is with Rogue. But then I'll be honest, against Ventus, I mean, I know we all discussed it a little bit. Game 1 wasn't great. Was game 1 the Azir game? Or was
Game 1 was Irelia Viso.
Okay, so whenever he played whatever game the Azir game was, I forget what it is exactly.
The third game. That was the game where I was saying that the stats kind of lie to you.
Just looking at he looked shaken. I'll put it that way. Like, I don't want to say he looked like straight up bad, but the way he was team fighting at times with Azir, like when he was like engaging and stuff, it looked like he was in 2 minds about what he wanted to do because he was like second guessing himself. I could be totally bullshitting, but that's what it looked like to me. And he has this reputation of not being able to perform in high pressure situations. I heard you two, Veteran and Thorin, you've talked about Magic Felix before, about how like he was on a heart rate monitor and he was like just fucking through the roof. You know? Like just like a naked lady walked out in front of him and he hadn't had sex in like 6 years. You know, that was like how Magic Felix is, man. But this is why we haven't. You know, everyone can have bad series, right? Which is why I don't want to say, yeah, he's gonna crash and burn it in Leicester, because I wasn't convinced by his Ventus performance. But if Magic Felix sucks against SK, and he's gonna need to not suck because Shikari is not suited for this meta, in my opinion. I don't think he's a strong solo laner as far as like, yo, stick you on a carry, you will carry us. He literally has the lowest damage share of like any top laner in the entirety of EU Masters. Like literally, I know he's been a role player, but still, I don't think he's that kind of. I just don't think he is that kind of player, right? He's been in the UK scene for ages. I don't think he's ever been that kind of player.
I hate the term role player, by the way, so don't worry.
That's all right, mate. He's literally role players. He's fucking D&D enthusiast. This is literally what he is. You know, I'm just a tricky, but you know, basically, Magic Felix needs to not to step up, but he has to be like he has to be the guy for Fnatic if you're gonna beat fucking SK with Sakura in the top lane, like against Shikari. That's the guy.
Yeah.
So
I think
that's how to define it.
Yeah, because like I think Xmati is like pretty strong, but the meta doesn't quite suit him right now. Like you can't just expect what happened versus Misfits Premier when they played off against him to happen every time. I.e., he either just like offers himself, gives an offering to Magic Faker every single. It was so strange.
Interesting League of Legends player.
He had a really good performance at the last EU Masters, where, by the way, Thorin, I have to correct you, because I actually think Larssen had a really, really, really strong laning phase versus Foggen in that tournament, and Nip could have 2-0'd them really easily and blown Origin out of that entire tournament. And also, I'm not just saying this because Larssen's here, but if we're on this topic of like mids in general, because you bring up comparison between Magic Felix and Leader, Larssen actually hasn't shown any of these like question marks that we have over the two of them. Like if you were to take any of these 3 mids and stick them in LEC right now, I would expect Larssen to have the best split out of all of them, for sure. I'm not just saying that because I want him to unmute and talk more, but because it's legitimately true. And this is why that group was so interesting, because in my eyes, you had the 3 best mids of the tournament, the 3 standout mids of the tournament going head-to-head, like, immediately. But you also couldn't get one of them for the knockout stage, which really fucking sucked.
What do you think of Magic Felix, Larssen?
I mean, I think Magic Felix has good foundations. I mean, I think he's like a stable player, right? But I think he has issues where he doesn't. I mean, I think he plays pretty passive. Like, when I scrim against him, I can just, like, you walk up to him, you know, and he'll be afraid, kind of. He'll be, like, thinking, oh, fuck, my enemy jungler is here, right? I mean, I think he has good foundations, but I think he can be a bit too passive at times. Where I feel like I can abuse him if I just, like, freeze my and walk up to him. He will never walk up for, like, 5 minutes, you know? So I feel like he can be a bit passive and not, like, do enough things. Like, sometimes I feel like he's a bit too passive and doesn't do as much as he should, right?
Yeah.
But I think he's like a decent player. I mean, he has good foundations, and yeah.
I think the big strength Magic Felix showed in the group stage, at least, not so much because he didn't have the opportunity to do so versus Ventus, but he was one of the best split pushers, actually. Like, I think he had probably the best split push game, even including Leader's game versus Rogue. I think the way that Magic Felix played out the map was a lot better. And I think that kind of showed the kind of consistency he has in solo queue that really allows him to get all of these accounts up there. I think he's one of the more intelligent mid laners in the tournament for sure. And
yeah, I think I agree. I think he's a talent as well. I mean, he's not stupid. I think he's like pretty smart, but
yeah,
I think he can be a bit too passive at times. But I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, he's not the kind of guy who has spent his time like perma-testing limits in solo queue. He's played like a very consistent, cerebral game. He's very, very good at that. You could argue that would put like a ceiling on where he could potentially end up, but he's probably the safest bet if you know, we see that he can do this kind of thing in an offline environment. Like, if we see that the nerves don't get to him, then he's probably one of the safer bets that you could have for the rookie mids.
Who should win the semi-final between Fnatic and SK?
I've put in caster predictions, right? And I think I predicted Fnatic 2-1, but I will be honest with you, if recent form is an indicator, and I also think kind of stylistically the two, I'm really fucking worried about Shikari against Zachary, just straight up. I flashbacks to 2018 EU Masters when Shikari was playing on XL, I think it was, and he just got bodied by like every top laner there. I think he's grown a lot since then.
Click Tech, apparently. I think it was Click Tech was the theme.
Yeah, like, just either way, I'm worried. I'm worried about him versus Sakurai straight up. I mean, I'm worried about everyone versus Sakurai, to be honest, but especially for this matchup. And it just, for me, it just comes down to if Fnatic play like group stage Fnatic, I think they will win 2-1. If SK perform like offline SK as well, then that deducts them 10 League of Legends points. But I think SK have looked like the best team personally so far. So I think it's going to be a really interesting one to see.
If Magic Felix has a good performance, then I think Fnatic win. Because I think then the Magic Felix will play out the map in a way that SK are ill-equipped to do so. They just don't seem to actually understand it. And my evidence that I'll put forward to you for that would be the first game versus LDLC in the quarterfinals, where they had a really strong 1-3-1 comp. Sakurai was monster ahead on Jace.
Well, there's perma grouping in that
and
game.
Then he perma went 5-man mid.
Yeah, I
and
remember that.
And LDLC like, oh, thank the fucking stars, comp, do your thing, please. And even though they were like 8k goal behind, LDLC were able, like, they had to steal the Baron. No, actually,
I think that's how they won. Yeah,
yes,
SK stole. Yeah, Fnatic stole the Baron.
Fucking Baron. They were 8k goal ahead with a ridiculously good 1-3-1 comp, where Sakurai was a monster ahead because they just didn't. They don't understand actually how to play their solo lane compositions out. Game they were losing because they didn't have a really decently scaling side laner, and they kind of need this because they don't understand how to close out the games early. And then next game they just pick Gangplank Victor, and they're like, so whatever. Like even if they don't stomp the laning phase, their solo lanes are gonna hard carry them later on regardless. But versus Fnatic, if you show weakness like this, I think Fnatic are smart enough to abuse that, even if the weakness that Fnatic have is specifically in the top lane scenario. So for the same reason, like I would, if it was a best of one and group stage, I'd be worried for the same reason that I'd be worried about Fnatic versus Misfits, you know, because I feel like Dan would actually get the comfort that he needs to get to the point in the game where he's really, really good. I would be worried about them versus SK because then I think Sakura just has a completely free game, you know. But in a best of scenario, I actually give the edge to Fnatic if Magic Felix shows up. If Magic Felix shows up and they can secure priority on the map through Magic Felix and Dan, then I think that Fnatic are the guys to take down SK. If they don't do this, then I think SK will eventually just roll over them anyway. Because yeah, I think their top laner will get significant advantages in lane like no one else. And if Magic Felix is underperforming, Gen X is the other good guy, and then the fact that I think Dan is far better than Fnatic doesn't matter at this point. Unless something really changes in all of these scrims and Xmati can show up, because I think Xmati is one of the best AD carries in the tournament. Then it would be FF. Yeah.
Who do you pick to win this game, Larssen?
I mean, I think it's really even. It's really even, Steven. Yeah, but I think SK will win if they don't choke on lane, I guess. I mean, I think Sakura is really good. I think Sakura is really good, so I mean, I think he can win them, but I mean, it's really even, I think.
Okay.
Sakurai, by the way.
Yeah.
If you were watching, I think it was Worlds last year or something last year, where they had loads of did loads of height footage with the teams, and for G2, there was one really strange, smiley, bald man that was in all of the promos thingies. And no one knew who the fuck he was. It's Sakurai. So when I saw his face on Leaguepedia, I was like, I recognize this geezer's face, and I realized he was in all of like the hype images with G2, even though they'd never played him, never mentioned him.
Sure.
And that's him. So yeah.
There you go. I think Sakura, like, if you
what has held him back from getting to the LEC then?
I mean, he was backstopping Wonder for starters in that split.
Yeah.
Good luck. Good luck replacing Wonder.
I mean, I think Sakura has been like, this is the best split has had. I think. I mean, this thing. I mean, I think he's better now than before. I think before he never really showed himself. I think, yeah. I mean, he has never really played at the Masters. I think. I'm not sure, but I think this is the first time he really shows himself. So.
He's also like 23, right, or 24.
I think it said 22 on the page, but he is older than most players. Yeah.
And
Top
I know.
3.
Yeah.
Go on.
No, I was just going to say, I know you mentioned that thing with Magic Felix in the past, which wasn't like, you know, he's not that old, but either way, like, it is true, right? That organizations, especially at the top level, you've got this flashy 19-year-old leader, you know, born in 1999, you know, phenomenal mechanics, doing all these outplays, looking like he has the biggest penis on the riff. Or you pick up someone who's like 22, 23, which in esports term is ancient, unless you're a CSGO player. Then I genuinely think, and when you combine the branding part of it as well, that whole kind of Wonder Kid shit is like, is gold, you know?
Oh, so, of course. Especially because, like, especially in the modern day, orgs all want to believe in, like, the potential years down the line.
Yeah.
And all that stuff. Even though that isn't really the way the game's ever been played in terms of recruiting people, to be fair, but whatever. I get why it's, like, an appealing narrative.
I think top lane's typically being a bit more of an older role. I might be wrong, though, because I have a history of being wrong with age in Europe, where Soaz is pretty old, obviously, but I think Alfaro was already kind of old when he started. So I think, I'm not sure this would be too much of an issue. I really hope it's not an issue for Sakura. I could see it being an issue of orgs, but I think for his one in particular, it might not be an issue. I'd agree with Larssen that Sakura really came into his own this split. You could definitely find him on lists. I certainly put him on my list of like players who I think could already be going up a tier in top lane, but he wasn't one of like the big guys. He wasn't Yoppa, he wasn't Shemek, he wasn't Aroma, he wasn't these guys that were all being thrown out as like, if you want a top laner, take these guys, and then I don't know, people just took Expect and Profit anyway for some weird reason. So if people were to get a look in, there was a waiting list of people before this split. Now I think Sakura has like jumped the line. And hats off to him, because he was really good before. He's phenomenal now. And it's a bit sad to me that you're not going to see more of Finn, but Finn already has like potentially a place secure because he's on Rogue Academy, and Lord knows you guys need to make some changes in the main team. But he might actually have jumped above Aroma now, for example, which is potentially a little bit sad, because I think Aroma is really, really, really good, but he just gets completely ignored every game on the team that he's on right now. So
For what it's worth, Alfari is currently 19.
there you go. See, I'm wrong on age again.
But I concede the point about top lanes being old because
He looks old. He does look older, doesn't
Mate,
he?
that's just what growing up in Wales does to you. It's just how it is.
Age is just a number. It's fine.
Is it a foregone conclusion that if Yopper indeed doesn't get his visa, which looks like it's the case at the moment, is it a foregone conclusion Mad Lions loses this semi-final?
Oh god. Wait, they're against. Oh god, yeah, this is dream
Against
scenario for
Misfits.
Dan.
Yeah.
This is such a dream scenario for Dan. He's going to be against a jungle main in top lane. It's like, oh no, it's really difficult, guys. I'm never going to hit my spikes. It's just really monster lost. I don't know. Like this game is really over actually. If they have to do this, and it's a real shame that they're not allowing them to just pull a treats and get the cardboard figure out, you know, and just allow him to play from home. Did you hear about that with TSM Thorin?
I saw the thing where people put like on the broadcast the like cardboard cut out of him as a joke.
Yeah. So he had visa issues as well, but they allowed him to play in the finals. They just put a cardboard cutout on stage.
Right,
They allowed him to play online from Canada.
Okay.
So
and what you're based on what you're implying, what the like RNA is basically going to play instead of it.
no, they
have a
have.
sub?
What is the name of their sub? I
I
can't.
can't see it on Gamepedia. So do you know who it is?
I actually don't know this guy's name.
I mean, I've never seen his name before, so it doesn't
I'm an
sound good.
expert, by the way.
Maybe that's more telling then that no one knows him. So,
But all I know is that he's a jungle main, and he's going to end up having to play top for them because of this horrible situation. And this is obviously not like a complete flame to him. He's as much of a victim in this situation as
Sure.
anyone. But this, like, Mad Lions were making this phenomenal comeback on the back of their top side, which isn't just Yopper, obviously. Like, Blue Azure had a really phenomenal time. I think Pretty Gree did step up this tournament. But it's just so much more difficult now, especially versus the team they are against, where they need to rely on that phenomenal top side. And they're just not going to have that now. Like, we've seen what happens if Dan gets to that stage of the game unabated. It's not very nice. Larssen can testify.
Wait, what did you say?
Nothing. Don't worry. Don't worry.
does that mean then, presumably, that whoever wins the other semi-final, the Fnatic SK Prime one, is a favourite to win the tournament?
Oh, I mean, you're asking if they beat Misfits. Yeah, they should both beat Misfits. I mean, SK are the team that actually had an almost perfect game versus Misfits. They allowed Yasuo through like many others have done in the past and regretted, but they picked Renekton into him and just ganked him level 3 immediately. And that was like, yeah, leader went like 0-9. Everyone across the board was like 0 and something. Misfits didn't really have an answer to that. So SK will at least come in with a lot of confidence if they win that series. I think Fnatic are smart enough to figure out ways to beat Misfits Prime in a best-of-5 scenario. So I think either of those two teams will be the favourites and Misfits will be the underdog, in which they have been in every single matchup except for this one on the pure basis that Yopper is not being there. So these guys are eternally being underdogs, and we may all be wrong again, and maybe Leader ends up holding up the trophy or whatever, but yeah, I would imagine they would lose to either of the two teams.
Okay. Right, since you said earlier that you had Matty as the best AD carry of the tournament, is the actual AD carry pool decent at this tournament?
Right. Is he the best? I mean, I know I said I had him up there, but would I call him the best? Because I think Kazi is really good as well, and I actually sent you a list, Foxdrop. I'm going to look up my own list. I'm going to look up my own list.
Veteran was not happy with my tier list of players.
Yeah,
Getting angry messages at 3 in the morning.
I was very
Man, I know. I'm just kidding.
Oh yeah, comp. Okay, so Xmet is the best one that is still in the tournament.
Right.
Because comp is not there anymore. But comp was definitely the best AD carry coming in. He's basically the big reason why everyone thought we were looking at an LDLC versus Rogue finals. The way that they have used comp and the way that comp has played this whole split has been absolutely insane. He's Greek as well, by the way, so blessed by forgiven hashtag. But I would say Xmati is now the best AD in the rest of the tournament. I think that he could start in LEC if he wanted to, particularly over certain teams that may be in this call right now. But the AD carry pool is not as strong as it has been in other years, because I would want to point to Neon, for example, who is really, really good, but has not had a good EU Masters. So it's a bit more difficult to point to him, but it's not as good as last year, where you had Crowny, you had Jesqua, you had Neon. Toaster was looking pretty good last year as well, but he was more of a guy that you grabbed for the same reason you would grab Piana, you know? But it's not as strong as it was then. But Xmati is still a really, really good talent, and I can already see spots that he could be filling in LEC. Okay. He was underrated on War, which was the last team he played for in the UK. And then he moved on to Gentside, and Gentside ended Gamers Origins' reign in France, definitively. Don't actually think, did they win the tournament? Yeah, they did. They beat Vitality in the finals, I think, or maybe they lost to them. Wherever they ended it, that's all that matters. That's all that matters. And that was when people started not underrating Xmati, and he started being a pretty good prospect thing. Because this isn't the first team that Dan and Xmati have both played on the same one. They were both in that Wind and Rain roster from last year, back when no one had any faith in any UK team, myself included. So,
okay. What about, if you had to pick someone thus far in the tournament to be your tournament MVP, who would you put forwards? Everyone give me a name.
I mean, you know who I'm going to say.
Yeah.
God. I mean,
you're obviously going to say Leader, like, obviously.
Yeah, I'm going to say Leader or Dan. One of those two is the MVP.
I don't know who I would give MVP to. So what's the definition? Is purely the best player or most valuable to their team?
I mean, it's up to you in theory. I personally just think it should be whoever played the best in the tournament.
Right.
Now, admittedly, you have to take into account all those factors. You know, who's on their team, how did they play? Yeah, you can add all that shit in, but however you chop it up, it's up to you.
Yeah, it's like, you know, if you take this person out of the team, are they still successful, sort of thing? That's sometimes the definition of MVP.
Yeah,
it gets a bit hairy, but
I think that definition works for both Leader and Dan. I think best performance relative to his competition, though, is Dan. So that's like best performance relative to competition. I don't think Dan has met another jungler that he hasn't just completely bodied in the first 6 minutes of the game. It's like not even close. But probably if you remove this guy from the team and the team completely falls apart, there have been multiple games where Leader is that dog in the meme and everything else is just on fire. So, especially in that interesting rogue game where his bot lane was like, for the early part of the game, Dan wasn't actually fully ahead until they made the Herald play topside. That was another everything is on fire, I'm the dog in the middle game. So both of them kind of count for that definition of MVP in terms of just pure skill relative to everyone else in their role. Maybe Dan, I'd say.
I actually think it's kind of... Yeah, I guess there are... I'm trying to think. I actually think a lot of teams have really done well by committee, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
In this EU Masters, there have been a few individual standouts. I think Leader is a good example.
Yep.
But I actually think that... Oh man, I actually don't even know who I'd pick. I do think Leader deserves something. Like, even in that, I think it was game 3 against Big, he literally solo dives, double dives LeBlanc at level 3.
Yeah.
Fuck was that about? Like that kind of play is just like, yeah, this is the X Factor play that just wins you a game. Just straight up wins you a game.
As well. Do you remember Plains versus Crogson? Oh my god.
Oh yeah,
every day about it. Holy shit.
That was well, yeah. So yeah, Leader is like, Leader definitely has to be up there. I'm just thinking, like, I want to mention Sakurai as well, but he hasn't straight up 1v9'd in the way that Leader has, or even Dan has. I think Dan is a good shout as well, because I think on Fnatic he's been a very... I mean, even when you saw him against Ventus, when
he was their jungler was out the game, like
So it's like...
By the way, fuck the life of anyone who has to cast the final if it is Fnatic versus Misfits, and they have to cast Dan and do using those players. Like, that's going to be absolutely ridiculous, whoever does that. So, like, fuck your life, seriously.
That's going to be something. But we've got... I don't know. That's a shit answer because you want me to give an answer. I'm gonna say Sakurai. I think he's the best player in the tournament.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would you go for? Larssen.
I mean, I think Sakurai as well the most, but I think it's really hard to say an MVP. I don't think there's been any like really standout player or anything.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I mean, I think Sako is probably the best as well. But I mean, it's not like it's clear cut or anything. I don't know. It's like pretty hard to say who's like. I don't think any player has been like dominating or whatever.
I should have mentioned Sakura as well, actually. That was like a huge omission on my part. Definitely, if you're talking about like skill relative to everyone else in his role, then yeah, Sakura should definitely be on that list as well. So then you have 3 there. If you're saying remove this guy and it's all FF, I'm not quite sure because Gen X has shown up in some games and Fennec had a really good group stage, surprisingly. So it's not like complete cut and dry. That like Sakura is completely solo carrying them, and even when Sakura has got a monster ahead, their map setups have not enabled him to just solo carry them in the same way that Misfits map setup against Rogue.
How do you think that happens, by the way? I know we already mentioned I think it was game 1 versus LDLC where he's playing Jace. I think at one point he Flame Horizons here it has like 4 items and here it has 1 or something vile like that. And then perma-group stuff. I was casting that game. And because my analysis isn't my strong suit, right? My merit's more on like just like the tone and kind of personality style of color casting, which is a little bit unorthodox. So I'm trying to improve my analysis and I'm like, shouldn't he be in a side lane? What the fuck's he doing? This seems obvious to me, but he's not doing it, so I must be overlooking something, right? Like this is League 101. Your Jace is fed as fuck. Stick him in a side lane.
Yeah, I mean,
no
and they
one
had
can match
tempo
him.
as well. I mean, and they had
Right,
tempo as well.
I just
so
don't
it's
understand.
not...
How does that happen? Like, how does that...
Watching them, they do appear to... No, wait, no, I'm thinking of Splice right now. So, okay, let me just reorient. Okay, so SK, yeah, no, there was no reason for them not to set up the map the way that you are saying that they should set up. They had every single window to do that. They just chose not to. So I would just assume the conversations that should be happening with regards to how you play out these compositions aren't actually happening in the back room. That's the only assumption I could make, because analytically speaking, they were just inting that game away. They had every opportunity to set up the 1-3-1 the way that they wanted, or the way that they should want to set up the 1-3-1. It just wasn't entering their minds that this is what we should do at this point. Even Splice were able to do this versus Mad Lions were able to do this versus Splice at points. And yeah, in the game 2, it got really, really messy, and they just started being okay with like a slow push setting up. But they were at the very least considering side lanes when it came to getting their Vayne back in the game. So a conversation is at least happening on the Mad Lions side that isn't happening on the SK side. Though Mad Lions are basically at the tournament now, so I guess that doesn't really matter. But yeah, you get the idea. I mean, I know for a fact that on Misfits, the reason why they will always end up with silence is because Leader and Dan are pretty fucking vocal about what they want in the mid to late game. Maybe Sakura isn't so vocal. Maybe Fennec is one of the more vocal ones. I don't know who is the vocal guy on that team, to be honest. But you could say it's on them and that they are not considering this. But I think if Sakura's this far ahead, he should just be like, guys, just play around me in side lane game as Monster 1. I don't know what you're doing here.
Fair enough.
Right, being as, I'll tie it back into what I actually opened the show with. I thought a last topic to ask you about and get your thoughts on is when people presented the whole National League angle, the reason I made sure in the intro to mention that it is also tailored specifically for those regions, for those like particular countries to have their own like, you know, grassroots effort, growth, something just to focus on entirely if you're just from only that region and you care along like national lines. But people do want to see how does it affect the LEC in terms of as a feeder league, in terms of like a filter to bring through talent. So the question I have is this, is since there are so many national leagues, and aside from teams where it's like, right, well, we have a team in a national league, so obviously we know the players on our team that's in the national league. Aside from those, is EU Masters actually going to be like the kind of the final judgment for a lot of these players in terms of their chances to get into the LEC? Like, for example, people who went out earlier than expected, people whose teams got eliminated in the groups, has this basically handicapped their chances of getting into an LEC team for the summer or going forwards? Was this the big platform they had to perform upon? Do you think if they were still very good in the national leagues, that will supersede that? What's people's take from that? What's the sentiment within the community?
I think the best way to answer that is to look at it from a perspective of opportunity costs. Like, I don't think that like Larssen, for example, he plays 3 games. Like, I don't think that hurts Larssen's opportunity prospective to get into the LEC, because he's on people's radar. They should already be scouting him. People should already be checking him out and having a good idea for him, and assuming, you know, behind the scenes he gets tryouts, and, you know, then they judge from that. But I do think that EU Masters gives you the potential to have a monster tournament and really get on people's radar, and then that opens the door for you. So if that makes sense, like, I don't think your team not performing so well shuts the door, but it can shine a spotlight. It can deny you of the opportunity to get a spotlight shone on you if you catch my drift.
I think you need that spotlight shone on you in a LAN setup as well. So I think if you don't make it to the semi-finals, I think you can already say that you are kind of missing out on displaying something. Like, someone like Larssen's not going to feel it so hard because Larssen's actually shown it on the ULCS stage that he can perform with the best of them already. And he's only gotten better since then. And players like Finn as well are not going to be so, like, bothered by this as well because they got to play this split. But other of, like, the bright shining ones that would be looking to get the attention, like Big, for example, like Zazie would definitely be a player who's looking for it. White Knight's trying to get back in, but Zazie is trying to get the attention of people in the first place. Kazi is a really phenomenal young talent who's trying to look to get these guys' attention. They're going to have this question mark of, well, what can he do at LAN? You know, what can he do in a really high stakes environment at LAN, which is what EU Masters gives that the normal regional leagues don't necessarily give. And that will be up in the air for orgs now. So I think you do get punished if you don't at least make it to the top 4.
Okay, what do you think, Larssen?
Can you repeat the question? I didn't really understand.
What do you think? Do you think that? I'll basically set up basically what people said. So the premise was kind of what I asked at the beginning of the episode. Like, do you think that the LEC teams will actually do their homework and watch people when they played in the national leagues? Will they just watch the EU Masters, and if someone did really well there and got to the LAN portion, then they've got a chance to get into a big team? But if they didn't, it's limited their opportunities. What's your take on it?
I mean, it's not like if one player has like one really good master, it's not like it's gonna get the LEC team immediately. I mean, obviously you need to prove yourself like many times to get, get the LEC team, whatever. But I mean, let's say for me, for example, I have LEC. I mean, I'm playing LEC Academy, right? So I mean, for my LEC team, like, know very well like how I've been playing like during the split and like how my practice is going, right?
Sure. So
for me, like, these games at EU Masters isn't like that huge for me personally, because I mean, since we scrim a lot, right? And I mean, we played a lot of other matches. I mean, my team knows very well like. How good I am, for example. But I mean, so yeah, but for a lot of other players, like, who don't really have an LEC, like playing LEC Academy where they like follow you a lot, then I think Masters is pretty important. Yeah, I mean, very important for a lot of players. Yeah.
Okay. And then the other aspect. Go on.
Well, I mean, I would like to say, because you brought up, like, will the LEC guys do their homework, or will they just watch, like, later on stages? They don't do their homework by and large. They really, really don't. They rely on player opinion, and player opinion is incredibly biased by and large. No offense, Larssen, but like, if you don't like this guy on a personal level, or the first time you meet this guy is entering your game, after then you're going to view every single play that he makes through this window, where their negative parts get like really, really explicit for you, really, really bigged up in your head, and the positive parts you are more likely to shrug away. We all have these kinds of inherent biases, but the things that scouts and analysts should be able to do is they should be able to look at it more objectively, because they aren't day-to-day playing with these guys. They aren't going to be as prone to these kinds of biases. They're just biased towards whoever shows the best potential. But you don't actually have these kinds of people in the vast majority of the LEC organizations, and it really, really, really pisses me off. So
I think, to add on the point of bias as well, there are certain narratives that you can rewrite by having a good performance at something like EU Masters. The best example is Leader, where it's almost like a meme that he has no champion. It's 2 champions he can play or whatever, right?
Yeah.
He's good, but no champion pool. And that kind of thing sticks when you have that kind of bias. And what we've seen so far from him, he draws like 5 bans every single day, picks whatever the fuck he wants, and shits on people with it. And, that's, he wouldn't be able to have an opportunity to display that unless he was at EU Masters.
Yeah.
The killer for me is that I even made a video on this topic, and everyone made out like, well, that's just obvious, Thorin, where I made the point that, like, if you're an NA org at this point in time, you should literally be putting a decent amount of your scouting efforts into just looking at EU Masters and National League level talent, because the idea is if you can get the next Caps before he's Caps, you can get him for nothing. He'll come to your team. He's definitely going to say yes, and it would be the easiest way to scout. Now, as far as I can tell, none of them are doing that, of course. So they don't seem to have put any effort into that. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, Broken Blade on TSM, right? He's a like 18-year-old player from the Turkish.
Yeah.
Sure.
In Turkey, right? So that's a great example of people.
It was very, very good, yeah.
Yeah, and I know, I'm sure people like Veteran heard of him, like pro players probably, you know, he was on their radar a bit. But for me, someone who is kind of intermediately involved, but not like super involved, but not totally ignorant of regional leagues, never fucking heard of him. So
yeah, so I liked Broken Blade from watching solo queue, which is the big thing that pisses me off that a lot of people don't really do. A lot of LEC teams do not bother watching solo queue. That's how you really get at these guys first, by the way, because you could call that players like Leader, players like Caps, players like Broken Blade were going to be good if you watched their solo queue and saw how they were approaching solo queue. And
say what you like about LS Veteran. LS at least does do that with the players he's trying to scout. He tries to watch their solo queue games and see, like, you know, do they look like a competent player in a vacuum? Like, people take for granted that, like, everyone's doing that. They don't. As you say, most people never put any effort into that.
No, they don't. They really, really don't. And I think most of them, I mean, this is the big flame. Most of them aren't actually capable of doing it. Most of them are not actually capable of reading how a player behaves in game and translating that to how is this guy approaching his learning process in the game, and therefore how is this guy going to develop. I liked Broken Blade for the same reason that I liked Leader. So it was a really, really good pickup for TSM.
This video was generously supported by Dean Tanglis, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Butt Pounder 420, JDubs, Chi Mao, Daniel Olivar, Jiangheng Lu, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, NateDOhDoubleG, Alexander Rao, and as always, a special thanks goes out to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Now, do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my work? Maybe you want to ask me a question for my monthly AMA? Do you want teasers for who the guests are on my upcoming content? Maybe you want to take part in a monthly esports discussion with yours truly. Well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.